1,650 tons. That is the weight of a single stone block sitting in an open field in Lebanon. The most powerful crane ever built by human beings cannot lift it. It has been sitting there for over 2,000 years, cut, shaped, polished on one side, ready to be moved. And in 2,000 years, nobody has figured out how. I want to be clear about something before we begin. This is not from a conspiracy website. This was documented by the German Archaeological Institute, published in a peer-reviewed journal in 2014. The stone is real. The weight is confirmed. The method is unknown. And Lebanon is just the beginning. Today we are going to visit 7 places. 7 places where the official version of human history quietly falls apart. Not because of myths, not because of legends, because of the stones themselves. A city built in the middle of the Pacific Ocean by people with no metal tools, no wheel, no written language. Its total weight equals the Great Pyramid of Giza, a fortress carved 18 floors into the earth where 20,000 people lived in complete silence while enemy armies walked directly above them. Walls that have survived 50 earthquakes, while the buildings constructed on top of them by the people who conquered them collapsed, were rebuilt, and collapsed again. And one structure buried under a mountain in Indonesia that may be 20,000 years old. If that number holds, the oldest pyramid on Earth was built when mammoths still walked across Europe. And everything we call the beginning of civilization was not the beginning. 7 structures, 7 impossible questions. Let's go. The Bekaa Valley, Lebanon, 1,100 meters above sea level. The Romans built one of their greatest temples here. The Temple of Jupiter, grand, enormous, a statement of imperial power. But here is the detail that stopped me cold when I first looked into this place. The Romans did not build the foundation beneath their own temple. They built on top of something that was already there, something older, something they apparently could not explain either. The greatest engineers of the ancient world looked at this foundation and decided to just build on top of it, without question, without record, as if even they understood that some things are better left alone. In 2014, a team from the German Archaeological Institute was doing a routine survey of the surrounding quarry. They moved aside some overgrown brush and stopped walking. Lying in the ground, partially buried, was a stone block the size of a swimming pool, cut, shaped, one side polished smooth. It had clearly been prepared for transport and then abandoned. 2,000 years ago. Nobody had touched it since. They called it the Forgotten Stone. And when they measured it, I'll be honest, the numbers didn't seem real at first. 19 meters long, 6 meters wide, over 5 meters tall. Weight, 1,650 tons. To feel what that means, take 5 fully loaded passenger aircraft and press them into a single block of stone. The Liebherr LTM 11200, the most powerful mobile crane operating on Earth today, has a maximum lift capacity of 1,200 tons. It falls short by 450 tons. Now look inside the temple foundation. Already installed, already in place. 3 stones known as the trilithon, each one 19 meters long, each one 800 tons. They were lifted 6 meters off the ground and set in place with joints so tight they are barely visible to the naked eye. Someone lifted stones heavier than anything we can lift today, raised them 6 meters into the air, and placed them perfectly, without cranes, without steel cables, without engines, 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. I looked up what engineers actually say about this, not what websites say, what structural engineers and archaeologists on record have concluded. For the trilithon stones, 800 tons each, current technology could manage it. Barely. Using the world's largest crane, transported specially to Lebanon, set up over several weeks, under ideal conditions. For the forgotten stone, 1,650 tons, one engineer stated it plainly: we would need technology that does not yet exist. That is not a historian speaking. That is an engineer, talking about the present. Baalbek doesn't ask us to believe in magic. It asks us to accept something much harder. That somewhere in human history there existed a level of knowledge that we have not yet recovered. Not lost, not destroyed. Simply waiting. Cusco, Peru, 3,700 meters above sea level. The air here is thin. Every breath feels like half a breath. On a steep hill above the city stands a wall. I want you to try something before I describe it. Pick up a piece of paper. Any piece of paper. Now imagine trying to slide it between two stones, each one weighing 200 tons. It won't go. That's Sacsayhuaman. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they made a practical decision. Dismantle the fortress. Use the stones to build their own churches and palaces. The Spanish chronicler Garcilaso de la Vega recorded what happened. The conquistadors, men with horses, gunpowder and steel, managed to remove the smaller stones from the upper sections. The large stones in the lower rows, they didn't even attempt them. But here is the detail that very few people talk about. A Spanish priest, a man of deep faith, wrote in his personal journal after seeing this wall: "These stones make me question whether demons helped build them, because I cannot imagine how men did this alone." A priest, writing privately, admitting that what he was looking at shook something in him. The people who built this wall had less technology than the Spanish, and yet they built something the Spanish could not touch. Each block in Sacsayhuaman is a different shape. No two stones are identical, irregular, multi-faced, unique, and yet every single stone fits its neighbor perfectly. No gaps, no mortar, no binding material of any kind. Modern engineers measured the tolerance, the margin of error between stones, less than 1 millimeter, achieved with stone hammers, at altitude, on irregular blocks, each one heavier than a loaded freight truck. And then the engineers found something else, something that changed the conversation entirely. The walls of Sacsayhuaman lean slightly inward. The shape is not straight, it zigzags. When engineers analyzed this, they recognized it immediately. It is a fully engineered anti-seismic structure. The inward lean, the zigzag pattern. They distribute seismic load across the entire wall. No single point bears the full force of an earthquake. These are principles we formally understood in the 20th century. The Inca applied them 500 years before our textbooks described them. Without formulas, without computers, without any written system at all. In 5 centuries, Cusco has been hit by dozens of major earthquakes. The Spanish cathedrals, built from stones taken from this very wall, collapsed, were rebuilt, and collapsed again. The Inca walls below them, not one crack, not one displaced stone. Here is what I keep coming back to. We build skyscrapers today that need maintenance every decade. The Inca built a wall that has survived 50 earthquakes without a single repair. I don't know about you, but that makes me feel like somewhere along the way we traded something. Permanence for speed, longevity for convenience, and we didn't even notice when it happened. Sacsayhuaman does not just survive earthquakes, it was designed to, by people who had no scientific language to describe what they knew, but who knew it completely. That is a different kind of intelligence, and we have not given it a name yet. The Pacific Ocean, the island of Pompeii, thousands of kilometers from the nearest continent. Here, in the middle of open ocean, someone built a city. Not a village, not a settlement, a city, on 92 artificial islands connected by canals, like Venice, but made of black volcanic stone, in the middle of the Pacific, 1,000 years ago. The people of Pompeii have one rule about this place. Nobody enters after dark, not a legend, not a bedtime story, a rule that people follow. today. In 1907, German colonial governor Victor Berg decided the rule did not apply to him. He entered the central tomb at night, opened one of the burial chambers. Inside, the skeletal remains of unusually large people. The next morning, Victor Berg was dead. Cause of death: never established. The local people were not surprised. Whether you believe in curses or not, and I'm not telling you what to believe, the fact remains. A man entered that chamber and did not survive the night. Make of that what you will. The total weight of stone used to build Nan Madol, 750,000 tons, comparable to the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid was built by ancient Egypt, a civilization of millions with developed economy, organized labor, and metal tools. Nan Madol was built by an island population of 25,000 people. No metal, no wheel, no draft animals. And the nearest basalt quarry is on the opposite side of the island, behind mountains, through jungle that remains nearly impassable today. The walls rise 8 meters above the waterline. They have stood for over 1,000 years through tropical storms, typhoons, and centuries of complete neglect. Archaeologists have a theory. The builders floated the basalt columns on bamboo rafts, navigated them through open ocean, then used palm tree levers and inclined planes to raise them layer by layer. Experiments have partially supported this. Partially. In 2016, UNESCO designated Nan Madol a World Heritage Site. In the official documentation, they used a phrase that is rare in formal academic writing. The logistics of its construction remain poorly understood. Poorly understood. That is the scientific community's careful way of saying, we don't know. The legends of Pompeii say the city was built by 2 sorcerer brothers who sat on the shore and played magical instruments while the stones rose by themselves. Archaeologists do not believe in sorcery, but they also cannot explain what happened here. Sometimes the legend and the mystery are the same silence, wearing different masks. Central Turkey, 1963. A man is renovating his basement. Ordinary Tuesday. He knocks down a wall. Behind it, a dark corridor, leading downward. He keeps going. The corridor keeps going. 18 floors down, 85 meters beneath the surface. He found a city. Derinkuyu was not built for comfort. Every detail tells you that. The corridors were cut deliberately low and narrow, so an invading army would have to move in single file, bent over, unable to swing a sword, unable to use a shield. Each entrance was sealed from the inside by a stone door, half a ton each, rolling across carved tracks. Impossible to force from outside. Each door had one small hole in the center, just large enough for a spear. Think about that. Every single design choice in this city was made by people who knew with absolute certainty that someone was coming for them, and they built accordingly. Derinkuyu held 20,000 people, their livestock, their food stores, wine cellars, oil presses, schools, churches, stables, and even a morgue. 15,000 ventilation shafts cut straight through 85 meters of solid rock delivered fresh air to every single level. And here is what modern engineers find almost impossible to explain. Those ventilation shafts are nearly perfectly vertical, through 85 meters of rock. The deviation from true vertical is almost zero. Today we achieve that using laser levels, gyroscopic sensors, and satellite navigation systems. The builders of Derinkuyu did this by candlelight, in complete darkness, through solid rock, and they didn't miss. Not once, across 15,000 shafts. There is something else about Derinkuyu that most documentaries don't mention. Running from the lower levels is a tunnel, nearly a kilometer long, connecting Derinkuyu to another underground city nearby. Geologists have since scanned the entire Cappadocia region. The scans showed underground voids, potential cities, beneath hundreds of square kilometers. Derinkuyu may not be the largest. It may not be the oldest, There may be a network down there that we have barely begun to map. What would drive 20,000 people to move their entire lives underground? Not for a night, not for a week, but to carve schools and churches and wine cellars 85 meters beneath the earth and call it home. Whatever the answer was, it must have been the most terrifying thing they had ever seen. Derinkuyu proves something uncomfortable. That fear, deep, existential, inescapable fear, can produce engineering that outlasts empires. No cranes, no lasers, no blueprints, just the absolute need to survive. And apparently, that is enough. Southern Africa, the 11th century. In the open savanna, a city rises from the earth. Walls 11 meters high, granite blocks, not one drop of mortar. The blade of a knife cannot fit between the stones. At its peak, 18,000 people lived here, the capital of a kingdom that controlled the gold trade from the heart of Africa to the Indian Ocean coast. Arab traders had written about this city centuries before any European ever arrived. They described it as the center of the wealthiest kingdom in the southern world. The history was always there, always documented. Some people simply chose not to read it. In 1871, a German geologist named Karl Mauck arrived at the ruins. He looked at the walls, he looked at the craftsmanship, and he refused to believe what he saw. His conclusion, written in his journal: "This must be the palace of the Queen of Sheba, built by Phoenicians, or Romans, or Arabs, anyone other than the African people who were standing right in front of him." For the next 100 years, colonial science searched desperately for another explanation. The British colonial government of Rhodesia officially banned publications connecting Great Zimbabwe to African builders. Archaeologists who told the truth were fired, defunded, professionally destroyed. The truth survived anyway. It always does. The builders used a technique called thermal spalling. They lit fires against the granite surface, then poured cold water on the heated rock. The sudden temperature change caused the granite to split into flat, even slabs. No metal tools, no chisels, no saws, just fire, water, and a deep understanding of how stone behaves. The resulting walls have stood for 900 years, without mortar, without repair, without anyone maintaining them. The Great Enclosure of Zimbabwe remains the largest ancient structure in all of Africa south of the Sahara, built by people whose story someone spent a century trying to erase. When Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, the new nation did not name itself after a person, not after a river, not after a mountain, after a wall, because those stones represented something that could not be suppressed, could not be defunded, could not be professionally destroyed. Great Zimbabwe teaches us that the most dangerous force in history is not ignorance. It is the deliberate decision to remain that way. Bolivia, nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. The air here holds half the oxygen of sea level. Standing still feels like mild exertion. Moving feels like effort. On a high plateau near Lake Titicaca lie the ruins of Puma Punku, Gate of the Puma. When you arrive, it looks like a disaster zone. Enormous stone blocks scattered across the ground. An earthquake destroyed this place centuries ago and threw the blocks like toys. But even broken, even lying on their sides in the dirt, these stones are unlike anything else on Earth. The blocks are cut from andesite, one of the hardest volcanic rocks on the planet, and they are cut with a precision that engineers today compare to laser machining. Perfect 90-degree angles. Drilled holes exactly 6 millimeters in diameter, spaced at identical intervals. Surfaces polished to the smoothness of glass. Then there are the H-shaped blocks. Each one has approximately 80 individual faces, and every single H block is identical. They interlock like components from a factory production line, standardized, repeatable, precise. 1,000 years before the first factory existed. In the grooves of some blocks, researchers found traces of metal clamps. Analysis showed the metal had been poured in liquid form on site, which means the builders maintained portable furnaces hot enough to melt bronze at 4,000 meters altitude, where there is barely enough oxygen to breathe, let alone sustain a fire hot enough to melt metal. One researcher decided to test the official explanation that these cuts were made with stone hammers and patience. She took a piece of andesite, stone tools only, and attempted to reproduce a single decorative pattern on a section the size of her hand. It took 40 hours. There are hundreds of blocks at Pumapunku, each one processed on every surface. The mathematics of the official explanation have never been fully worked out. No one has calculated how many people, working how many hours, for how many years, would be required to produce what we see here, because the number would be very uncomfortable. Pumapunku was built by people with no writing, no wheel, and no metal tools capable of cutting andesite. And yet the cuts are there. The precision is there. The identical H blocks are there. The evidence is not the mystery. The mystery is that we have no framework to explain the evidence, and we haven't built one yet. The island of Java, Indonesia. For centuries, local people climbed a hill called Gunung Padang to pray among the old stones at its summit. A sacred hill. Nothing unusual. Nobody asked why the hill was shaped so evenly. Nobody asked why it rose so perfectly from the surrounding landscape. In 2010, a team of geologists arrived, not to study history, to study earthquake activity. They pointed ground-penetrating radar at the hill, and the hill pointed back. The radar showed something no one expected. Beneath the soil and grass, the hill was not a hill. It was a pyramid, a massive stone structure with internal chambers, multiple construction layers, built in stages, over a very long period of time. The researchers extracted organic material from between the stones, 30 meters below the surface, and sent it for radiocarbon dating. The results came back. They checked them again. The lower layers of Gunung Padang are approximately 20,000 years old. 20,000 years. That is not ancient history. That is the last ice age, when glaciers covered half the northern hemisphere, when sea levels were 120 meters lower than today, when mammoths still walked across Europe. The oldest Egyptian pyramid is 4,500 years old. If Gunung Padang's dating is correct, this structure is 15,000 years older. The findings were published in 2023 in Archaeological Prospection, a peer-reviewed scientific journal. The scientific community is divided. Some researchers accept the data. Others argue the organic material may have been naturally deposited, not placed by builders. The debate continues, as it should. That is how science works. But here is the question that doesn't go away. If the dating is correct, who were these people? They lived before agriculture, before pottery, before any civilization we have a name for. And they were building pyramids with internal chambers. What else did they build? What else is sitting right now under hills we haven't thought to scan? How much of human history is still underground? Gunung Padang doesn't just raise questions about the past. It raises questions about how we define civilization itself. We measure civilization by what survived: pottery, writing, monuments. But what if entire civilizations rose, reached extraordinary heights, and fell, leaving nothing behind except a hill that looks perfectly shaped? If you know what you are looking at. 7 structures. 7 places where the story we tell about ourselves quietly runs out of road. Baalbek shows us that someone moved mountains of stone using methods we haven't recovered. Sacsayhuaman shows us that knowledge can live in human hands without ever being written down. Nan Madol shows us that the most remote place on Earth was not remote enough to stop human ambition. Derinkuyu shows us that the will to survive can carve 18 floors through solid rock by candlelight. Great Zimbabwe shows us that truth can be buried by power, but stone outlasts power. Every time. Pumapunku shows us that precision existed long before the instruments we use to measure it. And Gunung Padang quietly suggests that we may be measuring human history from the wrong starting point entirely. We live in a world of satellites and supercomputers. We can send a signal to the edge of the solar system. We can sequence the human genome in hours. And yet, we cannot move the stone in Lebanon. We cannot explain the cuts at Pumapunku. We cannot replicate the ventilation shafts of Derinkuyu with nothing but a candle and a chisel. Perhaps the most dangerous assumption of our time is that progress moves in only one direction. Forward. Always forward. Primitive past. Advanced present. These stones disagree. They speak of knowledge that peaked and vanished without leaving instructions. The builders of Baalbek took their method with them. The masters of Pumapunku left no drawings. The architects of Derinkuyu never wrote down how they stayed perfectly vertical 85 meters underground in complete darkness. All they left were the stones. And the stones are still asking. If this is the kind of history you want to explore, the kind that doesn't fit neatly into textbooks, this channel exists for exactly that reason. Subscribe to Enigma Science. We will keep looking. The stones have been waiting 20,000 years. They can wait a little longer.